Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano are two of the most legendary Jedi in the entire Star Wars saga, but have you ever wondered what their first meeting was like and what happened between the son and the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be exploring in today's story. The skies above Corellia were burning. Luke Skywalker knelt behind a smoldering chunk of Dura steel, the heat from a nearby explosion prickling the back of his neck. The choking scent of scorched metal and ozone filled the air. All around him, blaster fire danced through the ruins of Coronet City, painting red streaks across the smoky sky. Imperial stormtroopers, still loyal to the broken empire, fought with desperation and cruelty. It had been months since the Battle of Endor that saw the destruction of the second Death Star, the deaths of Darth Sidious and Vader, and a fatal blow to the Empire. But that didn't mean it had died there and then. The Empire was spread across the entire galaxy, and since that moment they had been struggling to find a direction and a purpose. With their Emperor dead, the Imperials were flailing and becoming even more dangerous than before, which led Luke to this battle on Corellia. But Skywalker wasn't alone. A squad of ragged rebels clung to cover, returning fire from the shattered remains of speeder cars and fallen buildings. The mission had been to strike a final blow against Moff Varek's stronghold, but they'd been ambushed. Reinforcements never came, and now they were barely holding on. It was one of the most desperate and intense battles any of the rebels had seen, and that's saying something considering that several of them had been serving since the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. An AT-ST thundered through the street, its legs crushing rubble as it bore down on their position. Its twin cannons swiveled and fired, sending another explosion cascading through a sidewall. Luke shielded his face, then rose with his green lightsaber ignited. He reached out with the Force, pushing against the walker. Its right leg buckled slightly. He strained, trying to tip it fully, but his concentration faltered under the weight of so many enemies pressing in. Troopers advanced. The rebels were pinned. Luke's green lightsaber was a blur as he battled back blaster bolt after blaster bolt. He dodged the fire from the AT-ST and was ready to leap towards the war machine to cut it down when he caught sight of rocket troopers getting into position, ready to blast him. He dived back down to safety, trying to remain calm and figure out his next steps. His rebel strike team were counting on him. But just when all hope seemed lost, the tide of the battle turned. A rocket whistled through the air, striking the AT-ST's leg joint with surgical precision. The walker staggered, then crashed to the ground in a blaze of sparks. Troopers turned in confusion, then the shadows shifted. Out of the smoke and flame, a second team of rebels appeared, blasters firing, taking the Imperials by surprise. And leading them was someone that Luke had never seen before, a Jedi. Twin lightsabers flashed in a blur of white, a figure in light, gray armor marked by flowing montrals and swift fluid motion. She danced through the battlefield, a storm of precise strikes and graceful deflections. Stormtroopers fell before they could aim. The Jedi moved with grace, athleticism, and an acrobatic flair that Luke had never seen before. "Who is that?" one rebel soldier gasped. Luke wasn't sure. She didn't speak. She moved with the surety of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Blades hummed and spun in tight arcs. Ahsoka Tano, the ghost of the Clone Wars, had returned. Her team of rebels charged into the battlefield, rallying Luke's forces, who joined them to push Moff Varek's remnant to the brink. The battle was intense, but within only a few hours, silence fell to the battlefield. The few remaining Imperial troopers fled into the ruins. Luke deactivated his lightsaber and stepped forward. The mystery Togrutan Jedi turned to him, her expression calm, though her eyes studied him carefully. "Luke Skywalker, I assume," she said with a slight smile on her face. Luke nodded, both in affirmation and in thanks. "Greetings, I am Ahsoka Tano." Luke had heard stories of her, but they had never met, not until now. Night settled over Coronet City. Fires still burned in the distance, but for the first time in weeks, the city slept. The Empire, who had had a hold of the planet for decades, was finally on the run, chased out by the rebellion. It was another free planet, another world safe from the remnants of the Empire. Luke stood atop a broken balcony overlooking the ruins, his eyes closed, his lightsaber clipped to his belt, and the cool air on his face. Ahsoka approached, silent as ever. She joined him without a word. "You fight like him," she said. "Like who?" Luke asked calmly, not opening his eyes. There was a long pause. "Like Anakin," came Ahsoka's eventual reply. Luke opened his eyes and turned, meeting her warm gaze. "You knew my father." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. He sensed the truth in her. She nodded slowly. "I was his Padawan for a time." Luke studied her. There was something different about her, not like the Jedi Masters he had read about. There was compassion in her eyes and deep sorrow. The only other Jedi he had really known were Masters Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and by all accounts they were both Jedi who liked to do things by the book. But Ahsoka, she seemed to be something else entirely. "I wasn't sure you were real," he admitted. "Stories about you always ended in mystery." Ahsoka smiled faintly. The idea that people had made up stories about her kind of amused her. "I walked away from the Order, but I never stopped caring about the people in it, especially Anakin." They both sat on the ledge of the balcony, the city quiet around them. Ahsoka glanced up at the stars. Corellia was quiet, peaceful, free. "Anakin was brave," she said, "and loyal. He didn't even want me as his Padawan at first, and I wasn't sure about him teaching me, but eventually we grew closer, and things got better. He saw things in people others didn't. When the Council doubted me, he defended me. He believed in me." Luke listened, hunger in his eyes. This wasn't Vader she was describing. This was Anakin, the father that he had never known. "There was one mission on Ryloth," she continued. "We were surrounded. I was terrified. He just grinned and said, 'Come on, Snips. Let's make it fun.' He charged into the enemy like it was a game, and somehow he won." Luke chuckled. "What, just like how you did earlier?" Her expression softened. "He was a hero," she whispered, "until he wasn't." The two of them sat silently for a long moment. When Luke spoke, his voice was quiet. "Anakin found his way back. In the end, he saved me. He destroyed the Emperor." Ahsoka looked down, her hands tightening. "Then you did what I couldn't. I tried. I faced him in a Sith temple on Malachor. I saw what he became. I couldn't reach him. I tried so hard to get through to him. I hoped he had remembered who he was. But that monster was no longer Anakin. I failed him." Ahsoka blinked back tears. Luke placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You helped keep him alive. He remembered you. He remembered love. That was enough." Ahsoka took something from her pouch. A small holo projector. She activated it. A blue-tinted image flickered to life. A younger Anakin Skywalker with his arms around a teenage Ahsoka, both laughing. Luke watched, mesmerized. He recognized the man. He looked vaguely like Luke, except with curlier hair and a slightly longer face. But Luke was undoubtedly his son. "I've carried this since the war," Ahsoka said. "I think it's time you had it." Luke took the device carefully, his father smiling, not a mask, not a monster, a man, the man he had seen as a Force spirit on the Forest Moon celebration just after the Battle of Endor. "Thank you," he whispered. To have this memento of his own father meant more to Luke than he could ever say, and he was eternally grateful to Ahsoka for giving it to him. "He would have been proud of you," she said. "He was proud of me once. And you brought him back. You reminded him who he really was." The two of them hugged, a gesture of thanks and a mourning for the passing of Anakin. They stood together as dawn broke over Corellia. The wind carried away the ashes of battle, leaving something new in its place. Hope. "There aren't many of us left," Luke said. "No," Ahsoka replied, "but maybe that's how it starts again." Luke nodded, the holoprojector still in his hand. Together they stared at the horizon. The ghosts they carried would never fully fade, but neither would the light they had come from, and Luke was ready to start there. He had a plan, he had a vision, and now more than ever, he had a motivation to help the Jedi return. He and Ahsoka would rebuild the Order. Weeks passed, and Luke and Ahsoka set out on a new journey to find a world where they could begin rebuilding what had been lost. A Jedi Academy not built on dogma, but on compassion, courage, and balance. If they could rebuild, they could learn from their past mistakes and hopefully avoid them in the future. Their first destination was Tython, once a bastion of Jedi knowledge, now a shadow of its former self. The ancient archives were buried under decades of overgrowth and ruin. Trees had grown through marble columns, vines curling around broken statues of long-dead Jedi masters. It was a place of ghosts. Because Tython was so far away from other planets, no one ever visited. It was, for all intents and purposes, a lost world. Entering the ruins, Luke ignited his lightsaber, casting green light into the dark, its hum echoing throughout the corridors of the library. "This place still remembers the Jedi of old," Ahsoka said, her voice reverent. "We will train here, where they can watch over us." In a clearing beyond the crumbling archive hall, they sparred under the blazing sun. Luke's blade came in the sharp, clean arcs that were as efficient as they were powerful. Meanwhile, Ahsoka danced around him, her twin pure white sabers deflecting and redirecting, her footwork nimble and unpredictable. "You lunge like he did," she said after a particularly close exchange. Luke grinned, catching his breath. "Is that a compliment?" "Maybe," she replied, smiling faintly, parrying another one of Luke's attacks. "He taught me to never hold back. You have that same fire, but you know when to rein it in. He didn't always." They shared a quiet moment, blades powered down, surrounded by the echo of lives once dedicated to the Force. Then the wind shifted. A presence stirred. Out of the trees came a squad of scavengers, heavily armed, masked, and desperate. Word had spread of Jedi relics buried on Tython, and these raiders had no interest in heritage, only profit. Blaster fire erupted, and Ahsoka and Luke reacted immediately, moving like water and flame. Luke deflected bolts with practiced precision, pushing enemies back with force waves that sent them flying. Ahsoka cut through the confusion, her sabers a blur of white light. She leapt from broken wall to stone pillar, striking down the vicious assailants before they could aim. One of the raiders lobbed a thermal detonator. Ahsoka caught it mid-air with the Force, redirected it back toward a cluster of enemies. The explosion rocked the ruins, sending dust and stone into the air. When the last raider fled, the silence returned. Perhaps this world wasn't as dead as Luke and Ahsoka had first thought. Luke stood among the fallen, chest rising with heavy breath. Ahsoka stepped beside him. "This place has already drawn attention. We can't stay long." Ahsoka agreed. This probably isn't the place we're looking for to set up a new Jedi temple. If scavengers have already found the place, chances are even more will come. They left Tython behind and traveled next to Yavin 4. It was the planet where the first major rebel base had been located, and the planet had seen its fair share of war. However, among its towering temples and stretching jungles, they found peace. The Force ran strong here, like veins beneath the soil. They meditated in the temple shadows, trained under jungle rain, and listened to the echoes of ancient battles fought by both Jedi and Sith. They spoke often of what would come next, of what the Jedi could be. "We can't rebuild the Order as it was," Ahsoka said one evening. "The rules, the rigidity, that was part of its fall." Luke nodded. "We build it on truth, on balance. We let them choose who they want to be, not dictate what they can't be." But within weeks, it became clear that Yavin 4 was not the ideal location for a new Jedi Order either. Sure, it had strong connections to the light side of the Force, but there was also darkness and a history of Sith and death. They departed the planet somewhat crestfallen, thinking they had found the ideal location. Still, the hunt continued. Their next journey took them to Lothal. It was a quiet and agricultural planet that Luke knew had been vital to the very early days of the rebellion. Still, there were no scars of war here. It was calm and peaceful. But there, in the plains beyond the capital, they discovered a hidden Imperial lab buried beneath a collapsed canyon. Inside were rows of cryo chambers and experimentation vats, remnants of some dark cloning initiative. But they weren't alone. Remnant Imperial troopers, already deep into the facility, turned their weapons on them. The firefight that followed was ferocious. They must have been hiding since the collapse of the Empire. Ahsoka wove through tight hallways, deflecting bolts off the cold metal walls. Luke used the Force to disable lights, disorienting their attackers, then disarmed them with surgical precision. At the core of the lab, they found files linking the project to Palpatine's contingency plans. Luke took the data. "We'll need this," he said grimly. He didn't know why they'd need it, or what for, but he couldn't ignore something this sinister. It was clear that if the Empire ever returned, Lothal would be of interest to them, therefore it wasn't the planet for the new academy. Later that night, atop a spire overlooking the stars, the two Jedi planned their next move. Where they would search next, what they would do. In a moment of quiet, Ahsoka leaned back on her palms. "You're so much like him, Luke," she said softly. "The best parts of him. I see Anakin in your hope, your strength. But I also see someone wiser." Luke looked at her, quiet. "Maybe together we can be what he couldn't." She nodded, the stars reflected in her eyes. "Maybe together we can be what the Jedi should have been." After weeks of searching, Luke and Ahsoka discovered a rarely charted planet, Ossus. It was uninhabited and had no points of interest. It was just a planet, yet it felt strong in the Force. Its sky was painted in hues of blue, with the sun rising over ridged mountains and deep green forests. The air was clean, the soil thrummed with life. "This is the place," Luke said. Ahsoka nodded, breathing in deeply. She could feel the living force all around them. "Then let's begin." They constructed by hand, building simple shelters, meditation chambers, and a temporary circular temple at the forest's edge, built from stone and purpose. It was not grand, it was peaceful, a place of beginning. Word spread. Survivors of Order 66, scattered Force sensitives, and curious seekers trickled in. One by one, they came, each carrying their pain, their questions, and their potential. Was this really the seat of a new Jedi Order? Were they safe to be here? Luke and Ahsoka trained together every morning, blades clashing in harmony. Their duels became legendary among the students. Tests of speed, philosophy, and emotion. Luke often fought with serenity, Ahsoka with fluid power. It was an amalgamation of the old style and the new. "You still fight like a Skywalker," she teased after one particularly intense match. "Just trying to keep up with my father's apprentice," Luke replied, grinning. They studied the Force not as dogma, but as a living ally. They taught students to trust their instincts, to honor their feelings, not suppress them. Meditation was encouraged, but so was connection with life, with others, with themselves. They were not forbidden from forming attachments, from being who they truly were. Instead, those attributes were worked into their training, making each student more uniquely connected to the Force. One day, as they walked through the blooming valley below the temple, Luke looked up at the white-flowered tree growing tall and proud. "Did you ever think we had lived to build something like this?" Ahsoka smiled, her expression tinged with memory. "I never thought the war would end. I never thought we would have another chance." Luke placed a hand on the bark. The Force pulsed gently through it. "We'll do it differently. We'll be better." She looked at him, eyes filled with both the past and the future. "Then let's teach them not just how to fight," she said, "but how to live." And so, beneath those stars, in the cradle of a new beginning, two Jedi lit a torch that would outshine the darkness. The Jedi would rise again, not as they were, but as they were meant to be. As Ahsoka and Luke walked back towards the temple, a glistening blue form slowly appeared in the trees far behind them, watching, approving. The ghost of Anakin Skywalker smiled. "So now it's over to you. What did you think of this story? What do you think it will have been like when Luke and Ahsoka meet for the first time?" Be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. And as always, thanks for watching.